Okay, we're recording. All right. So, how's everybody doing on this fun-filled Wild Wednesday?
Doing good.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah, I thought
good.
I saw you a minute ago out in the parking lot area.
Yeah, I was just walking back from lunch.
Someone was saying something?
I was doing pretty good.
Oh, okay. Hi, how you doing there, Ryan?
Bad. Couldn't complain.
Awesome. I just found out I got approved for that apartment in downtown San Diego, so glad that's one less thing I got to worry about.
Congrats.
Well, thank you very much. All right. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let me get going. Okay. So in your textbook, well, we're going to talk about several things today. The first is going to be ethical decision making. If I recall, we're actually going to bring this up over a couple different lectures. Um, Byers and Stanberry in the textbook, they stated that pyronesis, or no, I got that wrong. Sorry, phronesis. I forgot it's Greek. It's not Latin, so it'd be phronesis is a type of practical wisdom that enables us to act virtuously. The authors further noted that the concept of phronesis is attributed to the Greek philosopher Aristotle. The Oxford Review pointed out that this type of wisdom is gained through learning new things and reviewing the associated proof. Now, if you notice there, it's important that we're learning something new and we're using critical thinking skills to verify the associated proof. We can hear many things, and in this day and age with social media, the internet, anybody can say anything, and it goes all over the world, and you can make it look or sound like it's very authoritative. I once convinced my mother that there was a type of frog that had hairs in the back of its throat, and that the first toothbrushes that humans actually used were made for those hairs from the backs of a frog's throat. And she actually believed me. I made it sound so credible. I was probably about 17 at the time. Well, that's not good, because if I can convince somebody of something like that, then what else can I convince them of? And there becomes the ethical dilemma. If I'm able to convince somebody of something through persuasion, is it ethical for me to convince them of lies? No, it isn't. It is not ethical at all. And especially in business leadership, a business leader should be very ethical. They should be very honest and transparent. But that transparency doesn't mean that I tell you absolutely everything, but I tell you what you need to know. So there's things going on in my world that I don't need to tell my employees. I don't need to talk about all this stuff. But I do need to be transparent, especially when it comes to the decisions I'm making pertaining to that business. Now, if I'm thinking about selling the business, I may not tell them until I get enough things established and solidified, and then I break the news. So many times people think that being transparent means that you tell everything. No, you tell the people what they need to hear that's ethically correct, and you do it with truthfulness. Moving on here, the Oxford Review went even further and pointed out that phronesis can lead individuals to creative thinking and the ability to make sound judgments. So, theory versus practice. Your textbook noted that Arikiro Donaka, I apologize, I don't speak Japanese, never studied it, claimed that many universities do not close the gap between theory and practice when it comes to making sound judgments. So, a lot of times in school, in college, we go and we get all this theoretical knowledge, and that's really good. We need that theoretical knowledge. But the problem is when we don't also get a practical knowledge along with that. I know in my degree work, particularly in my grad school courses, that that um, the content was presented in a theoretical way. We got a good grounding in the theory, but there was a big influence, a big push to also practically work with the information. How would we practically apply it? Real world scenarios, things like that can help. Um, the textbook links phronesis to my tongue just left out of my head. Let me get a drink. Links phronesis to intellectual virtue. They also connected it to prudence, and prudence is very important when we're talking about the philosophical side of ethics, because we're going back to Aristotle on that right there, and Socrates. They were really heavy into prudence, and that's important that we have that. Let me get my cursor working again here. There we go. Leaders who use phronesis in decision making. Byers and Stanberry, they gave a number of attributes and characteristics that are demonstrated by phrenetic leaders. They apply moral discernment in a continual basis. They're quick when processing a situation, yet they evaluate all potential outcomes. They inspire their peers and employees through creating a sense of purpose. They develop a common goal for their team. They welcome many individuals into the conversation and decision-making process. They also inspire others to apply the frenetic approach to decision-making. Now, morals are necessary here. I don't know if you noticed, but in the last slide that it mentioned out here that the very first one, they apply moral discernment. So morals are a very foundational aspect that we need to consider. To achieve the frenetic approach to decision making, the leader or leaders and the organization must have a clear understanding of their personal and professional ethics. So right now we're going to be going into, there's the professional side of ethics and then the personal side of ethics. And there is no separation between them. They are intimately interwoven together. What are your own morals and your ethics? What are they grounded in? Where do you tap in for that firm foundation for your morals slash ethics? To understand this, we're going to take a brief journey here. Self-awareness. Self-awareness has become the latest trend in the world of management. But in reality, this is not new in the world of management or out in general society. Self-awareness has been a prevalent concept for thousands of years. You can see it in the writings of ancient philosophers, in the theologians that have written over the last, 1800 years plus, 1900 years plus, and the business world over the last number of decades. We can actually take it all the way back to the business world of ancient Greece, to the business world of Confucius time in China, also management professionals. And when we look at the article by Urich, we are going to find what she is speaking about over the last couple of decades, because there's been a big influence that, and I apologize, I didn't mention this information is coming from Urich. Urich. Zoom just locked out the top part of my slide, and that's where that one line was. So I apologize about that, but we got it there at the end. Let's look at the Temple of Delphi. Does anybody know what the Temple of Delphi was? Okay, I'll tell you. It's recorded that above the entrance to this temple called the Temple of Delphi, which was a temple back in ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, the temples, they combined religious practices with philosophy and science as they knew it at that time. These temples were mystery schools that you would have to be initiated into. And so only initiates were allowed to go into the actual temple, at least into the main parts of it. And at the Temple of Delphi, there were these words, Gnathe Sauaton, that were inscribed above the entrance. And we know that because it translates to English to know thyself. Before you would go into this mystery school to gain knowledge, you had to first go through self-assessment. You had to know who you are, why you were, where you were, when you are. And this may sound weird. When am I? Well, I'm now. Well, no. Now you are here and you are in the now. But when you were growing up, you were not in this now, you were in that now. And so we almost got to consider that now is this ever-changing moment of time. So the past you was in a moment of nowness. You've been on a journey of self-discovery in this class, in this college, in high school, in elementary school, middle school, preschool, your whole life. You've been on this journey of self-discovery. So the ancients, let's look at the ancients for a minute. When I say the ancients, the ancient philosophers, some of the well-renowned Greek philosophers who understood this concept: Heraclitus, Plato, Xenophon, Socrates. Huggins et al. In 2023 found that there is a link between one's culture and their level of self-awareness. Some cultures are actually more prone to being more self-aware than others. And I really think it's because of how they, one, are raised and the social norms that they participate in, the social interconnectedness. There are these things called cultural dimension studies. One is by Hofstede and one is by Tropiner. And they're excellent tools to use, especially for business professionals, to learn about a culture before you go and engage in business or have meetings with people from that culture. For instance, I like to joke and have fun, but if I'm meeting with people from Asia, business associates or colleagues from the university level in Asia, I'm not going to joke with them. Not when I first meet them. Maybe after I get to know them, I might, but I will never in a business meeting or a formal meeting, because I learned in these cultural dimension studies that humor is not seen as being a valuable asset or tool in the professional sphere. Most people in those cultures, while they do have humor, they don't always express it as openly as we do here in America or in Western nations. So I would have to amend the way I interact with people. And I'm not doing this to alter who I am, but rather I want to meet people where they are. I want them to be comfortable with me. And hopefully they've taken the same initiative and they are trying to make me comfortable as well, in which case we actually have a place that we can start from. I never want somebody to feel like I expect them to mold themselves to me, but I'm going to mold myself to them. And if they come into this and they choose to mold themselves to me and my culture, great. We're going to have an easier way to get the middle ground. Back to this statement by Huggins et al., particularly in understanding our emotions. A lot of cultures are more emotionally, their emotional quotient, emotional intelligence is higher, EQ. I think in TCM 1000, you learned about the emotional intelligence factors. So this would also link to self-awareness, and it links it to perception, especially as pointed out by Black et al. In that textbook, which I don't think you have in this. No, you don't have in this class, but you will later on in another class. Social perception. Social perception occurs when we perceive within a work environment. Now, we're talking about a business, a work environment, so that's why it's worded like that. Black et al., they wrote a book for business leaders, and so it's coming from that point. But it's the same is true in other social environments. If you've got a friend group or other sort of social environment that you're entering into, social perception is what we do when we perceive what's going on inside of that particular niche, in that little clique, that group. A higher level of complexity leads to a more complicated process of perception. Now, complexity is kind of the best way I can put it is the human body is a great example. We like to think that we are one. I am me, but I'm so much more than that. I am trillions of cells that form into organs, that form into the structure, the scaffolding, the bones, the muscles, everything that makes me me. But I'm even more than that. I got all these neurons in my brain that have interconnected through the 53 years of my life. But I'm much more than that. All of the cells in my body change every 7 years. Some more frequently, others right at the 7 year mark. So I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago, physically, biologically. I am made up of different matter. But it's so much more than that. My brain, the memories and the experiences and the perception I've had are so unique to me that if I had an identical twin who lived a very similar, almost exactly similar life as mine, we would still be vastly different when it comes to complexity. That's complexity. When you look at something that's simple and when you really dig into it, you realize, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it was that intensely complex. So this complexity comes out in our nonverbal communication. I want to say it's about 60% of our actual communication doesn't include words. It's the gestures of the hands, the facial expressions, how you position your body, how you stand, if you're standing or sitting, which direction your feet are pointing. If I'm talking to you, feet are pointing toward the door, subconsciously, I'm basically saying, I want to leave. Okay. So if I'm talking to you and I cross my arms, I'm building up a barrier. I'm defensive. If my arms are open and I'm leaning toward you, I'm very warm and I'm open to that environment. These are things that we read in other people. You speak nonverbal communication already. You just may not realize it. You've been learning it since you were, well, born. Now we have verbal communication. And when we verbally communicate, sometimes we don't do a very basic but essential step. We need to define the words we're using. Now, I'm not saying we're going to define every single word in a sentence, but the major words, the ones that aren't used quite as often or that have vastly different meanings. Like if you hear me use the word here, you're going to have to listen to the context of the sentence to know if I mean here as in Here or here as in Hear. Okay. But even more than that, if I'm going to talk about photophosphorylation, I should probably define what photophosphorylation is. You know it as photosynthesis. This way, we both are involved in this communicative event using the same definitions. It also includes social history. So this complexity includes social history. The social history I have lived as a human being, but the social history that my social group has lived. And that's very important because it adds a layer of complexity. Perception can be defined as the process by which one screens, selects, organizes, and interprets stimuli to give them meaning. When somebody is talking to you with verbal and nonverbal communication, you have to interpret what they're saying. Okay, Black et al. 2019 pointed out two separate sets of properties that impact our decision-making process when organizing a perceived reality. Reality is a strange thing. Reality is very subjective because the reality I'm experiencing may not be the reality you're experiencing, yet we're watching the same thing. So there are physical properties and there are dynamic properties. Black et al. Noted that there are three characteristics involved here. You have the characteristics of the person, the situation, and the perceiver. Okay, it's not just my experience, my perception that matters when I present information to you as a professor. I need to consider you, the one that's perceiving this particular event. And the best that I'm able to know your social history and all the factors I can about you, it helps me be able to relate to you better as we have this communicative event. Now, as you've noticed, I've introduced myself. Some of you I have known from other classes. Some of you I've talked to in hallways. Some of you I just met the first time on Monday. So we're just beginning to really know one another. But if you notice on day one, I did talk a bit about myself. I introduced myself and talked about things about me. And I didn't do that to brag. I did that so that you could get to know me a little bit more. So maybe you'd understand where I'm coming from when we're talking to help your perception. We ourselves and our intricacies affect the perception of others in a social environment. So when I walk into a room, I am directly impacting how people perceive me, whether I think about it or not. Things such as how I posture, the nonverbal communication we talked about a minute ago, how I'm dressed, how I act, the types of words that I use. Am I interrupting people? Things like that. So now let's turn our focus to the perceiver. Black et al. Discussed that the one perceiving can affect how they perceive another individual. So I can affect how I perceive. Okay. You can affect how I perceive you, but I can affect how I perceive you. There's a self concept. I have to know myself first and foremost before I can perceive you effectively, efficiently. Do we accept who we truly are? Do we see ourselves in the other person? If so, one, that could give us a commonality, a common ground, a place for empathy to begin. But taken too far, seeing ourselves in the other person can actually lead to some pretty devastating bias. Cognitive structure. What descriptive words do we tend to use? Does our culture impede our perception? I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I'm apparently Caucasian. I say that because, of course, you're thinking, well, yeah, of course you are. Not really. I look Caucasian. A lot of my lineage is Caucasian. But did you know that I have two great grandparents that were Native American? So technically, I'm not truly 100% of European Caucasian descent. And my dad did teach me some things about that culture. When I go camping, I always leave my campsite in better condition than I find it. I never want to overuse nature. If I catch a fish, I want to consume it. I don't want to leave too big of a ecological footprint, so to say. Now, I wasn't raised in the Micmac or the Maliset traditions. It was two different tribes, but they have influenced me because some of it was passed down to me through my father. So our culture can impede. I've dated outside of my race, if you want to call me having a race, because I'm pretty much just mixed, but Heinz 57 sauce. When I'm dating somebody, okay, my first wife is from the Philippines. Her culture definitely could have impeded how she perceived me or how I perceived her. It was something that we had to navigate effectively. So culture does come into the picture. Attitude. Black et al. Noted said a predisposition to respond favorably or unfavorably to objects in one's environment. That's what attitude is. The definition, a predisposition to respond favorably or unfavorably to objects in one's environment. So that predisposition does have a genetic component, but it also has a social component. You've heard the thing of nature versus nurture, genetics versus how you were raised. Well, here with attitude, it's going to be both. Some of the structures in the brain and how they're formed, my amygdala may be smaller than yours. My prefrontal cortex might be formed just a little differently. And these, the central gyri and stuff like that, these things can affect how my attitude is, how I perceive. That's why we've got to know ourselves. That doesn't mean I get an MRI and I study it so I know how my brain is shaped, but rather how I function with the brain that I have. I actually have about 30 spots inside my brain that are not supposed to be there. Okay? They're lesions in my brain. And there are things that it has caused that I've had to relearn or learn how to do better because of it. It caused some deficiencies, and I had to adapt for them. I had to know myself. Knowing myself means being basically functionally a stoic, my philosophically, an existential stoic, I take time at least once a year in a major session to assess myself. Who am I? Who have I been? Who do I want to be? What are the things I'm more predispositioned toward? And if I find something inside of my core being, my essence, that I don't like, I have only two options. One, I can accept it, in which case I've got to also accept the consequences. Or two, I change it. So we've got to know ourselves. Attitude is really a hypothetical creation. It really is the biology and how you're raised and in how you react in certain situations. Now, my dog can do things. He's a dog. If I get upset at him, It may not be because of what he did. It might be because I had stress in other areas of my life that I don't normally experience. And when something happened, I got upset. And I have to stop myself and remind myself that he didn't do something to deserve this. The same thing with dealing with human beings. I could have problems going on in my life that are causing me to worry and stress. If I've got this worry and stress, when I talk to other people, it may come out as having a bad attitude. So I've got to learn this. I had to learn that because of the nerve damage I've suffered, I actually don't have the same facial expressions I normally would have. And a lot of times people think I'm angry, and I'm not. So I've had to learn to either explain this, or I've had to learn how to manufacture emotions at the appropriate times without looking fake. Otherwise, people can't read me. And it causes problems. They think my attitude's out of whack. So, attitude is a hypothetical creation. Attitude has only one dimension, it is driven by our sense of self. The more I've become habitually in a place where I really assess myself and I keep tabs on it, the better my attitude is towards other people. Attitude is made up of a cognitive component, so our thinking, logical, rational side, an affective component, so our emotional side, and an intentional component, our will, free will, whatever you want to call it. So it really is made up of these three basic things, according to Black et al. Okay, Urich pointed out there are two types of self-awareness. You have internal self-awareness, so the intrinsic self-awareness. How do we see ourselves, our values, passions, aspirations? How do these fit with our environment, reactions? These include thoughts, feelings, behaviors, strengths, weaknesses. And how does this impact others? Now, there's external self-awareness. And according to Urich, it's understanding how other people view us. We've got to take time to think, how do other people view me? And that's going to take talking to people, one, and asking them. It's going to take paying attention. Because if you were in this classroom right now, we could do a demonstration where I would do something completely out of place. Now, I can read you almost like a submarine using sonar to know what's out in the water that you can't see out into, but you're kind of getting a sounding of what's out there. And I have actually used ridiculousness and comedy and humor to do that at times, to read people, to help me understand them better. So it's important that we do this, but we do it appropriately. It's not always appropriate to use comedy in every situation to try to understand people. Sometimes the best thing to do is to just keep my mouth closed and use my ears and my eyes and my mind. Now, personality, Black et al., they define personality as, and here they're quoting Salvatore Madi, a stable set of characteristics and tendencies that determine those commonalities and differences in the psychological behavior, such as thoughts, feelings, and actions, of people that have continuity in time and that may not be easily understood as the sole result of the social and biological pressure of the moment. In a summation, basically, we've got to be able to know, who am I at this moment, given all the factors that are affecting me? Everything that people may know, see, and hear, but also the things that I haven't let them know about. Because they're going to impact my personality, how I'm coming across to people. I am an extrovert. I am also an introvert. I guess that makes me an introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert. But either way, I am both of them. There are times where I love being around groups of people and I'm very social. And then I go through times where I pretty much live like a hermit. I see very few people, talk to very few people. And I do that basically because it's where I'm at that time. It's what I need internally. I know myself well enough. I can sense that. And so I just shut myself down to the social aspect and concentrate on myself. And my personality changes at these times. I'm still me, but different parts of my personality become more noticeable. So how would you describe your personality? These questions are rhetorical in some sense, but I want you also to contemplate on them. This is a philosophy course, so I want you to contemplate on these questions over the next few days. Let's turn our attention to self-esteem. Black et al. Defines self-esteem as one's opinion or belief about oneself or their self-worth. So self-esteem is, what do I think about myself? Some people think that they are the top of the top. They think they're all that and a cheese sandwich. Reality is, there are times where every single one of us is that. And the old saying would be the bee's knees. Okay? That we are at the top of our game. We're just really on par. We're doing good. We're good. But there are times where we're not, where we're angry, we're mad. There's times where we have narcissistic tendencies, even though we may not be narcissists. There are times we may be more selfish or we may be more devious. And we've got to understand this about ourselves when we're looking at our self-esteem. It doesn't mean that our self-esteem should go down. We need to take the whole package of who we are. Black et al. Point out that self-esteem can affect our independence, creativity, and motivation. Some further factors here, such as, are you an authoritarian? My dad was very much an authoritarian as far as a parent. What he said, that was law. End of the story. That was it. And he was quite abusive. I don't know if it was because he was authoritarian or because he was authoritarian because he was abusive, or he was abusive because he was authoritarian. I'm not sure which one it was, and he's passed on now, so I can't really figure it out. But there were some problems. Okay, what about being dogmatic? Such as you have a belief and you are unwilling to even entertain other viewpoints on that belief. That right there, one, it's good to know what you believe, but beliefs may not be grounded in fact. I can have a belief that Scooby-Doo is real, and I see the cartoons, and to me, Scooby-Doo is real, but that's not grounded in fact. You may sit there and go, yeah, Scooby-Doo is a cartoon. I say, well, maybe it was based on a real dog at some point. And you would say, but how can a dog talk? And you keep presenting facts to me, but I'm dogmatic in this belief and I'm unwilling to move. So I dig my heels in and I'm willing to fight for the belief that Scooby-Doo is real. Okay, that is like that's that dogmaticness that I'm talking about. What we need to be is we need to realize we have in our minds, we have facts, we have beliefs. Some beliefs are tied to facts, and they're all true. Some beliefs are tied to a few facts, and some beliefs are tied to no facts. If we can self-assess and really know who we are, then we can figure out, I have this belief, and having the belief is okay. There's no problem with having a belief that has zero facts attached to it. But be willing to do the critical thinking and the mental work to go through, why do I hold that particular belief as dogma? Okay, what about being introverted or extroverted? These are things that impact everything we're talking about, attitude, personality. Now we're going to change directions just briefly to ethics and values. You, each of you, have your own set of values, just like I do. And these are a basic standard or a blueprint for how we conduct ourselves. According to Black et al., and I would say very true statement there. These also act as a set of rules that we use in our decision making. When we engage in decision making, our values act as guardrails to keep us within certain limits. And they can impact our motivation as an employee or a student. Ethics, they can seem very similar, but there is a bit of difference here. They help us to determine what is right and wrong. They also help to guide our work ethic. And our work ethic is, do I slack at work? Am I always on my phone at work? I was at Walmart the other day buying some groceries. And there was an employee working, stocking shelves, something like this, and they were just on their phone. Maybe put up an item, be on their phone. The work ethic there is, the work is not important. The paycheck's probably important to them, but doing the work isn't. Talking on the phone was more valuable and more important to them. So that would be an example of a work ethic. And our work ethics and our values, there is an interconnected link, a bridge between them, but each one is kind of its own nexus, even though they are connected. Culture. Black et al. Define culture as being the collective programming of the mind, which distinguishes the members of one human group from another. This involves language, music, religious beliefs, social expectations, family relations, and oh, so much more. Culture is what happens when a group of people are around each other for quite a long time. They form a common set of stories, of experiences, a rule book, ways of doing things, methods of talking, communicative words, and all these things. So we can see culture goes all the way down to our very core family group, that nucleus of what a social or a society is made up of. That nuclear component is the family. So we're talking like an atom. The nucleus of an atom is the nucleus, the very center of it. So the very center of culture is going to be at our family. And we got to look to see how we were raised and how that affected how we perceive and think and believe, and feel. Cultural norms. So before we begin our in-depth study on perception, it is advisable that we understand what cultural norms are. Cultural norms are the ideas that a particular society or segment of society deems as being acceptable. These norms affect how and what we perceive. Cultural norms are the unwritten rule book of what it means to be part of a segment of society. Okay. We have our culture at whole, our society as a whole on this globe. Then you look at nations, different nations are their own societies. They're similar to the global view, but they're more nuanced, and there are some differences between different parts of the world. Within a nation, you're going to have different subsets of social groups. Here in America, you can see different states are known for different things and different ways of reacting and acting. Within a state, you're going to have different smaller subsets, and these are going to have their own nuanced norms, all the way down to the town or even neighborhood where you live or were raised. These norms affect how and what we perceive, and I found that cultural norms can dictate social morality. Such as, they tell you, get a job and pay your bills. Contribute to society, but you better not select one of those jobs over there. For those of you who don't know, my dissertation was looking at the ethical treatment and the fair treatment of women in a particular industry. I was looking at gentlemen's clubs, adult entertainment. I wanted to see if the managers were treating the females that worked in these places fairly, equitably, or if there was a sense of mistreatment. And it was an interesting study. It took 2 years to do the study. Very fascinating. But so many times people think, well, I got to get up. My family says I need to be good. I need to pay my bills, contribute to society. But I'm having a hard time getting a job. And somebody says, maybe a young lady says, I'm going to go work at this particular gentleman's club. Oh, society's like, oh, you better not go do that. And so this is what I'm talking about, these cultural norms. They say do these things, but then you have to specifically avoid certain things in order to remain in good grace with that particular social group. So now we're going to shift gears and go back a couple hundred years to the Enlightenment. The need to understand yourself, it went through the Enlightenment. So we have the ancient philosophers promoting it. You see it in philosophy all through the years. We get to the Enlightenment. So through the Renaissance, the medieval period, you have theologians and some philosophers promoting it. You get to the Enlightenment. Here we find John Locke, Voltaire, Edmund Burke, Immanuel Kant. These philosophers you see are really promoting that you need to know who you are. So we went from the Greek Temple of Delphi, know thyself, to now the Enlightenment, know thyself. So the reason I bring that up on that slide is it hasn't changed. Even today, after the Enlightenment, after the age of reason, living in this modern day that we do, we still need to know ourselves. So why this need for self-awareness? Hamadian et al. Pointed out that self-awareness is self-awareness in a high-stress work environment like medicine is essential to maintaining stress. Now, you may think, I don't have a stressful work environment. You're college students. You have a stressful environment. You have deadlines all the time. You got major papers. You got to keep your grades up for scholarships if you have them. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. You've got to pass a class or you have to redo it. So you have lots of stress as a college student. And we're going to call that work stress because college, you're in school. This is your job. Even though you may have a job elsewhere, being a student is a full-time job in many ways. The authors also found that empathy is closely associated with self-awareness. The more self-aware I can be, the greater access I can have to empathy. And as I noted the other day, I don't normally have a lot of access to empathy. I've had to learn how to find that access, and knowing myself has been a huge key component in doing that. If I know myself, then I can ask myself the question, how would I feel if such and such situation happened to me? Or if somebody treated me this way, or somebody said this to me? I now am self-aware and I can say, I would not like that. Or that wouldn't bother me. Either way, I know myself, so I can answer these questions. Therefore, I can have more empathy. So being self-aware depends on your ability to feel what others are experiencing. In other words, empathy. So why do you think that is? In order to be self-aware, in order to really know yourself, you got to be able to feel what somebody else is going through. Well, as human beings, one, we are very social when it comes to being critters. We're social critters. We're this concept of somebody who's a lone wolf. It's really a misnomer. There are really no human beings that are truly lone wolves. A lone wolf could actually exist their whole life without anyone around them. When a human is born, they are 100% dependent on their parents and the people around them. And we are actually one of the only species on this planet that is as dependent for as long as we are. We don't hit adulthood until, well, legally 18. But did you know your brain has not stopped developing and growing and maturing until you're around the age 25? So let's just say for full maturity, 25 years. That's not what other species have to go through. They mature so much quicker. We mature much slowly, more slowly. So being self-aware means I know myself, I've experienced myself, I have experienced other people, I've related with other people in different circumstances and situations. I built up this database in my mind of feelings, and these feelings are the consequence or the outcome of something that has happened, either that I did or that was done to me. Now, because I have this database, I'm able to now turn it around and I can think, how would you feel? Now, I can just flat out ask you, I can ask Noah, how would this make you feel? Or I could just say in my mind, and this is what we normally do with empathy, how would I feel if this happened to me, if I was Noah? How would I think Noah, how would Noah feel? That's where empathy's at. So in some ways, I can't think about the pain or the joy Noah would feel if I myself hadn't been self-aware and learned about that pain or that joy. But just knowing that about myself isn't enough to be truly self-aware. I've got to now externalize it outward towards somebody else. Just like when I do my hair, okay, for those of you who know, I am bald. When I do the hair on my goatee, I stand in front of a mirror. Okay. I need the mirror to help me with my self-awareness in a physical way to be able to put my goatee in this series of bands. Just in the same way, by dealing with somebody else, by getting to know what somebody else feels, helps me to see myself more clearly. So we are so dependent on each other as a species. We are very interconnected as a species. The process. Okay, so now decision making, there's a process to decision making. We went through all this because it's very essential to go through self-awareness and understand decision making. We can't really engage in decision making until we get to the point of knowing ourselves. The decision making process begins with identifying the problem or situation. Okay, so we've learned who we are, we've gotten our self-awareness, we've obtained empathy, we understand social norms, perceptions. We got to make a decision. Where do we start? Well, one, we got to identify what the problem actually is. You cannot answer a question until you know what the question is. Many decisions begin based on a series of complex issues, a complex series of issues. And a wise leader sorts through the issues that determine the foundational problem. Sometimes the foundational problem is the leader themselves having a bad attitude or lacking sufficient self-awareness, or maybe somebody on their team lacking self-awareness or having a bad attitude. So we have to collect all the available information concerning the situation we're trying to solve. We have to identify how each aspect, variable, or factor impacts that situation. Then we have to conceptualize the problem in light of that information. And we got to ask, is the problem or situation what I originally thought it was? Or does it stem from something that I hadn't even considered? Sometimes we try to fix a problem or make a decision or deal with something, and we have got a false understanding of its root causation. This decision making can be very difficult due to the vast number of factors that affect any given situation. But practice over time can help you to become effective in making decisions. But how do you determine which factors or variables are most important? Now, we're going to get into a few concepts today. We're going to get into linearity and non-linearity. Just as a little preface, nonlinear dynamical systems theory is the fancy name for what you know as chaos theory. The human brain thinks in a series of steps: A, B, C, D, consequence. But that's not how reality is. Reality is A, 22, 15, pound sign, upside down, consequence. And that consequence may not happen for years. And the brain that's inside of us humans is such that the longer the time between the original action, so the cause, and the consequence, the less likely we are to associate them together. So I do something, and the consequence does not come up for 15 years, or even 5 years, or even 1 year. I can't relate back to that's the original thing that caused it without actually doing a lot of thinking and processing and remembering and going back and checking notes. So we've got these consequences. That's why it seems at times that we're just living our life and suddenly bad stuff starts happening to us. Well, some of that, not all of it, but some of it it's the consequences for actions that we made years ago. It just took that long for the consequences to come back and get us. In metaphysics, we may call this karma. So gathering information. Let's go back to gathering information. We're going to go back to linear and nonlinear more in a few slides, but I wanted to give you just a little bit of an introduction into it so you kind of know where we're headed to. We're going from the normal way that you're used to thinking to actually seeing reality as it actually really is out there. Gathering information. You will need to spend time collecting information about the situation or problem. You have to organize the information under different headings, filter the information to include only relevant data, and determine what the parameters are, such as where does the problem begin and end. You can use something like brainstorming. Brainstorming is a process that includes writing things down, one item on a piece of paper, and then you stick it to the wall. Then you organize these notes in a logical order and you identify subtopics and topics and groupings. And you look to identify any high level topics that you can organize the other subtopics under. And lastly, you identify the overarching topic of the entire thing. And brainstorming is a great tool that you can do by yourself or you can do as a team. You can use a decision matrix. A decision matrix is another method to make decisions. It's a 2x2 matrix. So you have 2 boxes here and 2 boxes here. So it's like 4 boxes all put together. You list potential ways that you can approach a decision or to determine which project to tackle. So you can make decisions based on this matrix. Now, this is a decision matrix here. This is what it looks like. Here, we are trying to look at questions about doing homework. So on one side, we have easy effort and difficult effort. Along the top, we have high personal cost and then low personal cost. So easy effort, high personal cost is work on homework each day. Easy effort, low personal cost, work on homework right before it is due. Difficult effort under high personal cost is complete all my homework on one day. Difficult effort under low personal cost is take 3 days to complete my homework. Now, using this information, we can sit here and we can make a decision on when we should do our homework. So this is an example of a decision matrix. And I used homework because as college students, it's something you are very familiar with. But the decision matrix is also known as an Eisenhower matrix. It was used by General Eisenhower quite often. And it's a good way to sort things out, depending on the complexity, though. If it's really complex, a 2x2 matrix may not be enough. You could use a decision tree. And this is another way to engage in decision making. It's similar to brainstorming. You begin by writing down the foundational problem or situation. You draw a line to the right and begin listing information related to the problem or situation. And you keep repeating this until you've connected all the information that you've collected. And it looks something like this. Failing a course is the problem. You draw some lines to the right. You have not doing my homework in time, not attending class, too busy. Lines from there. You have from the top one, so not doing homework on time. Then you have spending time with friends or working a job. And then you go even further. You have parties and movies and needing money. You go down to not attending a class and moving to the right, you see sleeping too much. We move a step over, you have lack of motivation. The third one down, too busy. Moving to the right, working a job. Move again, needing money. So this is a decision tree. My thinking is as follows. If the decision is fairly simple and there's not a lot of factors affecting it, a 2x2 matrix will probably be more than sufficient. If there are a number of factors or variables, you may want to use brainstorming or a decision tree because they seem more usable or useful with a large amount of data. Now, making the decision, once you have listed all the information in an organized manner, what do you see as the best way to solve the problem or situation? So in our example, it seems like there is a need to find intrinsic motivation to use our time better, to get our homework done so we can pass the class. There also seems to be a need to find a better way to be able to pay for living expenses, to meet our financial needs. And we're going back to the examples with the doing homework or failing a class. Now we've got to implement our decision. We've come to a point where we've made a decision. We have to implement it. That is very important. You have to continue to evaluate the problem or situation and make sure that your solution is effective. So we made a decision, we enact it. Do not stop. The process is still going. It's a continuous process. We need to go back and review it to make sure that we've got it answered right. Or maybe we didn't answer it correctly, didn't make the right decision, and we got to go back to the drawing board and start over, or maybe just have to tweak one or two things. So we have to keep track on it. There are some factors we got to consider. Humans tend to think linearly, like I mentioned a moment ago. A cause leads to an effect. There's some problems. Reality is nonlinear. A cause does not always directly lead to an effect. Has anybody heard of the law of unintended consequences? It's a real thing. It also is 100% avoidable. So let's see how linear thinking and the consequences relate. Often, the outcome or consequence takes longer than our brains can conceive, like we mentioned. The longer the delay between the cause and the effect, the more likely we are to not link the two together. And that leads to our confusion and bewilderment when the outcome or consequence occurs. It seems like it comes from nowhere, or it's karma, or the universe just hates me. No, it was something that you did or you said back in time, and you're just now reaping the rewards or the punishments for it. This is nonlinear thinking. We got a problem. It is affected by variables A, B, C, D. Now we've got to answer it. Or let me go back. Okay, we have a problem. We do something. Okay, this is the causation. At the moment of the time we cause a problem, it has factors A, B, C, and D affecting it. In all actuality, it has an infinite amount of variables affecting it, but we got 4 in the chart. Time happens. It could be 3 years. Now the outcome occurs, but we've got different circumstances. We got lowercase a, lowercase b, lowercase c, and d. That's because every moment in time is actually affected by a different list of factors and variables. So what was affecting you back when the problem actually happened or you made the bad decision is not the same things, they're not the same circumstances that are going to be going on when the consequence comes. And so when making a decision, and we've got to make a decision now in this moment in time, it gets confusing, so just hold on. We got to try to find as many of these variables and factors affecting this one moment in time causing the problem. Come up with a decision to make a solution to solve the problem, that we're going to implement it. But we've got to think now in the future, when that future either consequence or outcome occurs from our decision, what will be the potential factors and variables at that moment in time? Now, you're going to tell me, well, who knows? We don't know. We can't do that. Well, in some ways, you're right. But we can try to predict and forecast. And we've got to do this as effectively as possible so that we come up with the best decision now for them. And this is very true when it comes to large, major business decisions. Nonlinear decision making. To make a nonlinear decision, you have to account for as many factors impacting the situation, determine the most probable effects, forecast the most probable spectrum of outcomes and consequences, because there's not just one potential outcome or consequence, there's a host of them. So we got to figure out of those, which ones are the most probable. We have to understand that an outlier outcome or consequence might happen, meaning if we think we've identified 3 possible outcomes or consequences from this particular action or decision, there might be a 4th one that we're either not seeing or we don't think is probable, and it can come as an outlier. We have to select the best path toward our desired outcome. We have to plan how to navigate that path, and we've got to use waypoints to check on our progress along the way. It's kind of like if I want to set something for the future, if I've got to try to make a decision now, or I got to deal with something now, but I've got to consider future consequences. Think back to Monday. You're sitting in this classroom, okay? You know where my desk is, and you that whiteboard all the way across there. Well, I go and I put a little tiny dot on that board, and that's my goal. That's what I want. That's my objective. But I'm all the way at the back of the room by the door coming in. To get there, I've got to walk around all these desks and chairs. So I'm not walking a straight line. And if I'm not paying attention, I may wind up at one of the windows instead, and I miss my mark. But I've learned instead of putting a very specific target, I put a zone. So in this case, I would put that whole whiteboard as the zone. That all consequences there are in the acceptable range. Now, when I traverse there, all these little meanderings of life, everything that happens in life happens, and I snake all the way there. But as long as I'm headed in that general direction, I know I'm okay. So in the end, I get there and I've arrived, but I'm at the upper left corner. I still met my target because I didn't make it a point in the very center or somewhere on there. I made it a big zone. And that's important when you're working with nonlinear decisions. You got to come up with a series of probabilities and possibilities, figure out which ones are the best, and go for that zone. So what now? Now that we've taken this little journey that's taken us through ethics, personality, decision making, the linear and nonlinear aspects of the human mind and reality and decisions and problems, how should leaders in today's business environment make ethical decisions in a frenetic way? Byers and Stanberry pointed out that normative ethics includes using rules and norms to make decisions. So which ethical code are we going to apply? Are we going to stick to one single ethical source? And I'm going to tell you right now, since that's the last slide, sticking to one single ethical source may not be the wisest solution. I would recommend finding a few philosophers at different periods of time. Find different public figures that you can go back and look at also. See where they got their ethics from, what they use for their norms, their rules. Talk to people that you respect who are living in today, this world now. Maybe a grandparent, a friend. Talk to somebody who's lived, who's experienced, who's lived a rather full life. Find out where they go to for the source for their ethos, their personal ethos. You don't have to imitate them, but by getting their input and finding out where they go to, it shows you possible grounding points for yours. So that is today's lecture. This class, being as how it's compressed into 8 weeks, we got to go through a lot of material quickly. This was literally in 2 days. We had to go through 2 weeks of material from a normal 16-week class, but just hang on with me. We'll get there. We'll get through this material. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. If you do think of a question, or you're watching this video later on and you have a question, please send me an email. And that's a good thing also for me to point out. When I give feedback on homework, I do give feedback. But don't respond to that feedback. Don't leave a message on Canvas in the feedback for me, because Canvas just will not, it doesn't notify me when a student leaves feedback. And I won't see it for weeks until for some reason I'm going back through old assignments for some reason and I see it. I'm like, well, that's odd and embarrassing. If you need to get a hold of me about feedback I give you, or if you have a question in class, or you need to get me information or whatever, send me an email. That's the best way. Or talk to me before or after class on Monday, or even on Wednesday here on Zoom. Or set up an office appointment with me or something like that, and we'll take care of it that way. All right. In that case, we are going to be finished. I hope you have an excellent rest of your Wednesday. Make sure you keep up with Canvas. Now, in the discussions, many students do not do the replies. Every discussion is going to have 2 replies unless otherwise stated in the instructions. These replies are going to go to your classmates, so 2 different classmates. If you don't do that in a discussion that's worth 20 points, that's an automatic 5-point deduction. And that can add up to an entire letter grade over the course of a class, a course. So make sure you're diligent and you do your replies. Make sure you use APA 7 references and citations in your discussions. You do the narrative or parenthetical citations in the body of the message, just like normal. You put the references at the very end of it. Make sure you follow the format for APA 7. You don't have to format the message itself using the general rules of APA 7 formatting because that's ridiculous. This is a text message in a text box, but I do require citations and references. Papers, make sure you format them using APA 7 for general formatting rules and for your citations and references. And that's about it. You have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a
Awesome.
good one.
Thank you.